Tonight on Bridge City News, gas in places like Taber and Medicine Hat are considerably cheaper than in Lethbridge. We talked to Dan McTagg with GasBuddy.com to find out why. There's been a huge influx of international students going to Lethbridge College. We have the details. And the Canadian Bible Society has created special individualized Bibles that were given to the families of those impacted by the tragic Humboldt Broncos bus crash. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. You may have noticed there is quite the difference in gas prices in southwestern Alberta. Gas in Lethbridge is averaging $1.30 a litre, while the price in Taber is around $1.15, and in Medicine Hat even cheaper at $1.12. Dan McTagg from GasBuddy.com joins me now via Skype. Dan, what's going on?
Well, what's going on is that all gas stations are either charging an operating margin or some are engaging in a gas war. Look, whether you're in Taber, whether you're in Lethbridge, whether you're in Medicine Hat, most gas stations have to pay pretty much the same taxes in for fuel. If you're really a big player like Costco or one of the big large box stores, you might get away with buying it for $1.20, all taxes in. But most are paying about $1.22, $1.23, which means if you're selling for $1.15, you're giving away money in the process of selling gasoline because it's costing you that much more to replace it. That's a classic definition of a gas war, and that's what we're seeing in Taber and to a lesser extent in Medicine Hat. But of course, here in Lethbridge, if I'm a gas station, I might be making 7 cents a litre, and I want it to be well understood that at 7 cents a litre, you're going to have a hard time honoring credit cards at 2 and 3 cents a litre. You're going to have a hard time paying for your electricity and paying your overhead if you're only selling 15 to 20,000 litres a day. So to those cities that are at $1.30, I know it sounds terrible, but in fact, it's not a bad price considering you have no control over the wholesale price, which has moved up dramatically across the province. In fact, all of Western Canada is seeing a phenomenon I have never seen before, and that's refiners taking on an extra dime of profit versus this time last year.
We took to the streets of Lethbridge to ask those in our city if they feel they're being gouged a little at the pumps.
Unfortunately, Alberta seems to be taking the brunt for the rest of the country. But the last time I went to Saskatchewan, it was 10 cents a litre less there than here, and it's always 10 cents more. So it doesn't seem right.
Lethbridge College student enrollment is up 6% this year, and the registrar says an influx of international students is what's contributing to the spike.
170 students from India, almost 100 from Kenya. So we've doubled the number of international students over the past year. So it's exciting, exciting times. I can see they're getting involved with the college community already. A couple are running for student association representative spots. So they're making themselves at home. It's great to see lineups in the library, but lineups in Tim Hortons.
The college has launched 2 new programs, baking and agricultural enterprise equipment. Hilgersom says the multi-million-dollar trades building anticipates more increase in the years to come.
We just are seeing an upswing now on apprenticeships. It usually goes through a 4 or 5 year cycle. So the last couple of years it was kind of on the low. The economy was slowing down, but now stuff is starting to heat up again. Our welding program is usually the one that sets the trend. So that has a market increase this year. So we're looking at hopefully those halls will be bursting in 2 years' time. Mm-hmm.
The University of Lethbridge has also seen an overall increase in enrollment this year by 0.5%. Associate Vice President of Students says they take pride in the increase of Indigenous students.
We're so pleased that the Indigenous student enrollment has increased again this year by 4.3%. Last year it had increased by 2.5%. And this is important to us because the U of L is in the heart of traditional Blackfoot territory, and we really do feel a sense of responsibility to be a leading voice in reconciliation initiatives and being inclusive, creating a welcoming place for all of our Indigenous learners. So we're very happy about that 4.3% increase.
Massey says the university ensures Indigenous students feel supported and well integrated, providing services through the Indigenous Students Union. Post-secondary students and parents are continually feeling the financial pinch with the price of tuition and books. Students are now finding other options, with textbooks being available for free online. Professor Dan Farguson at the University of Lethbridge notices that it's not only helping students, but it also helps how he teaches his students.
Students are evolving, and we all evolve with the internet. And so when you want to know something, where do you go? You go to YouTube or someplace on the internet. You don't look in your textbook first and foremost anymore. So these become, in essence, part of the landscape, if you will, the online landscape, which seems to be more compatible to university students today.
Farguson adds he is pleased the downloads are free for students and work well with other online tutorials. Lethbridge Big Brothers and Sisters received a check for $100,000 as a result of the Rotary Club of Lethbridge's 100th Anniversary Legacy Project. Executive Director Jen Visser says this money could not have come at a better time.
We've been in this building for so long that we've grown. We've served over 500 children last year. And because of that, we as a board and an organization needed to know if we wanted to stay in this building, if we wanted to maybe move somewhere, or if we maybe wanted to have a satellite office somewhere else in the community. And after working with an architectural firm who sat down with our staff, seeing what we did, we decided we wanted to stay in the building. There used to be an expansion of our building way, way back in the day. And what we're doing is we're just essentially putting it back onto the building and then going at the back of the building. So we're not losing any parking, we're not losing anything. We're just expanding our current footprint of the building to add an additional about 1,000 square feet.
Visser adds that there are over 100 children on their waiting list who are looking for a mentor. Anyone interested in becoming a mentor should contact Big Brothers and Big Sisters via their website. Lethbridge Art Days are now in full swing. Art Days is a celebration of all Lethbridge arts and artists. Events are taking place all of this week. Many are free of charge. It is also an opportunity to talk to the artists directly and purchase their artwork.
So Arts Days is a celebration of all the arts. So it could be visual arts, it could be performance, it could be dance, it could be music. We had a historic walking tour last night. So we celebrate and explore and discover everything. And this year's theme is on beat. So we have a lot of drumming events even. So lots to participate in. Most of it's free. It's all about the community.
Art Days will cap off with a free weekend event taking place at Casa. Waterton Lakes National Park is looking for volunteers to help rebuild after last year's Keno wildfires. Throughout the year, Waterton Lakes National Park has volunteer programs. Currently, they're accepting volunteers to sign up to help plant trees and other outdoor work. The next group event will take place tomorrow and on Thursday. For more information, make sure you check out their website at mywaterton.ca. A man who was accused of causing a residential explosion in Lethbridge last June pleaded guilty in provincial court yesterday to unlawful use of explosives. 32-year-old Sean Lavich is scheduled to stand trial this week on charges of intent to cause an explosion and making explosives for an unlawful purpose. Police responded to the explosion June 2nd in the 17th Street and 9th Avenue South area. When they arrived, they extinguished the fire and noticed evidence of another explosive device. Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi is asking the city's Integrity Commissioner to look into how information was leaked about the potential of the city hosting the 2026 Winter Olympics. Nenshi says it was originally discussed in a closed-door meeting. The meeting addressed the possibility of relocating Calgary Transit's Victoria Park bus garage to accommodate plans for an athletes' village. Nenshi says the problem with the leak, without context, makes it look like council was hiding something as opposed to being part of a greater conversation. Alberta Premier Rachel Notley has accused UCP leader Jason Kenney of playing minister of make-believe while in India. Kenney, along with two fellow UCP MLAs, toured India last week, meeting with senior government and oil and gas officials. Kenney says he used the trip to strengthen relations with Indian officials established previously when he was a federal cabinet minister. Notley says Kenney was extolling the virtues of our government's policies, such as low taxes. A radio ad in Saskatchewan is drawing criticism for claiming it's a myth that residential schools robbed Indigenous kids of their childhood. The radio spot, which aired recently on multiple stations, was made by the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, a Winnipeg-based think tank. The 2-minute-long spot also suggested it was not true that residential schools robbed Indigenous children of their culture and language. In 2008, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper apologized to former residential school students, saying it was a sad chapter in Canada's history. He said the policy of assimilation was wrong. The Canadian Bible Society has created special individualized Bibles for the families of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. Reg Graves, the Western Development Officer, joins me now via Skype and Airdrie. Reg, How did the Canadian Bible Society end up hooking up with the Humboldt Broncos?
So about a month and a half after the crash, just one morning, it came to me that perhaps we should do something as a Bible Society. And so we had 29 individualized Bibles produced to be given to the victims of the crash, both to the families of those who lost their son and also to the survivors.
How well were the Bibles received by the families?
With a family who lost their son, they were just a bit overwhelmed with it. As I met with them, you could still sense the real sense of grief that they're experiencing. But when I presented the Bible to them, both the mom and dad stood there with tears in their eyes and were so appreciative of the gift. And the Bible had in memory of their son in front of it.
Thanks so much, Reg. Tragically, 16 people were killed and 13 others were injured in that April 6th bus crash, which really shook the hockey world and the entire country. Police in Winnipeg say their Bait Bike program is leading to arrests. Last July, police rolled out the initiative in response to a large increase in bicycle thefts in the city. Since the program has been up and running, officers have been chaining up bikes equipped with GPS tracking devices, waiting for people to steal them. So far in 2018, Winnipeg police received reports of about 1,800 bike thefts. A Toronto man who was to inherit his father's multi-million-dollar aviation company was found guilty yesterday of the first-degree murder in his father's death. The court heard how Dylan Millard carried out the premeditated killing of his father, which was originally ruled a suicide. 71-year-old Wayne Millard was found dead in his bed with a bullet lodged in his brain November 29th of 2012. His son had pleaded not guilty in the death, but the judge hearing the case found otherwise. Millard's other victims included his former girlfriend, Laura Babcock, and Tim Bosma. He killed the 32-year-old Bosma after taking the Hamilton man's truck out for a test drive. Comedian Bill Cosby has been sentenced to 3 to 10 years in state prison for a 2004 sexual assault. A judge ruled earlier that Cosby should be considered a sexually violent predator. Cosby's name will appear on a sex registry sent to neighbors, schools, and victims. The 81-year-old must undergo lifetime counseling and report quarterly to authorities. Prosecutors asked for 5 to 10 years behind bars, while his defense lawyers asked for house arrest, saying Cosby is too old and helpless to do time in prison.
Mr. Cosby, any comments, sir?
No.
More than 3 million people died in 2016 from drinking too much alcohol. Now that's according to the World Health Organization. A new report says that about 237 million men and 46 million women around the world have an alcoholic addiction. The highest rates were in North America and European countries. About a third of alcohol-related deaths were the result of injuries, including car crashes. The average daily consumption of alcohol is about 2 glasses of wine per day, a large bottle of beer, or 2 shots of spirits. The study says globally, around 2.3 billion people drink alcohol. It is unclear which party will lead New Brunswick after Monday's election. The Progressive Conservatives beat the Liberals by a single seat, 22 to 21. Both party leaders say they want to govern.
This is something that has not been seen in a generation. I will tomorrow meet with the Lieutenant Governor. I will discuss with her my plans to do everything I can to work collaboratively with the other political parties to ensure that we're able to pass legislation, to ensure we're able to make investments that will better the lives of the people of New Brunswick. I will ensure that we meet the legislature as quickly as possible to see if it's going to be a possible endeavor to go on a case-by-case basis, on a vote-by-vote basis, to see if we're able to continue to make the types of investments we would like to make.
This is a new beginning for New Brunswick, not only by looking at that map over there, but it is a new beginning for New Brunswick. We know the tasks that lie ahead. If we approach them together with our province, first in our hearts, then our task will be accomplished.
Residents hit by Friday's devastating tornadoes in Ottawa and Gatineau, Quebec, were taking stock of all of the damage. One resident said he lost all documents he needed for an upcoming refugee hearing.
I'm a refugee claimant. I just moved in from Montreal to Gatineau a couple of months ago. And just when I thought I was settling down, the tornado came and swept off every apartment at the house where I live. I lost everything. I don't know how to express myself because I try to reach out to the immigration and everything. All my documents is gone. I don't even know. I just spoke to my landlord now and they said they can't find anything.
A lot of these front windows blew out, and the tornado pulled a lot of stuff out of the store, so you can see the damage from the roof.
The U.S. is ready to resume talks with North Korea about denuclearization. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he invited North Korea's foreign minister to a meeting hoping to have a deal in place by 2021. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says this is a long dance with Kim Jong-un.
North Korea allegedly promised to dismantle its main missile factory and also hinted towards taking down or at least deactivating one of its main nuclear complexes in exchange for certain provisions. Those are undisclosed at this time. But I think what Mike Pompeo was hoping for and what he was originally hoping for when he planned a trip over to North Korea, which was canceled by Donald Trump, is to move things forward.
Catch my entire interview with our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, bringing you some of the biggest stories from around the globe coming up after business news. According to the Old Farmer's Almanac, the prairies are in for a long, cold winter. But Environment Canada says it'll be more mild thanks to El Nino. I asked Jack Burnett, managing editor with the Old Farmer's Almanac, where the term El Nino originated from.
The term El Nino derives from the early Americans in the 16th and 15th centuries who had met the Spanish explorers and knew about Christianity. So they noticed that El Nino, if it came, always came around what we call December, the same time that the Christ child arrived. So El Nino means the baby, so they associated it with Christmas.
Mr. Burnett says we can learn a lot about weather patterns from animals, and he has more details on that coming up in the second half of our show. It was on this date that there was a huge fight over racial integration in schools. TV's Barbara Walters and actor Michael Douglas were born. This is Today in History for September the 25th.
September 25th, 1957. As hundreds of U.S. Army troops stand guard, 9 black students are escorted into Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. That happens 2 days after unruly white crowds forced the children to withdraw from trying to enter the all-white school. Decades later, one of the 9, Ernest Green, recalls the first major fight over racial integration of America's schools.
It was one in which we thought we were simply exercising our right to the best education that was available in Little Rock, Arkansas. You know, lo and behold, I think we were right.
1919. President Woodrow Wilson collapses after a speech in Pueblo, Colorado, urging support for the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty officially ends World War I and sets up the League of Nations, a forerunner of the United Nations. Wilson soon suffers a massive stroke that leaves him partially paralyzed. The U.S. Senate fails to ratify the treaty. 1897. William Faulkner, considered one of the great American novelists whose works include The Sound and The Fury, is born in New Albany, Mississippi. 1931. Barbara Walters, the TV newswoman and talk show host, is born in Boston. Her career milestones range from The Today Show and 2020 to The View.
You win some and you lose some, and I guess the only difference now is that I'm very happy when I get them, and I don't want to sound like the world's mellowest person, but if I don't, it doesn't kill me anymore.
And 1944.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
Michael Douglas, movie actor and producer, is born in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Among his on-screen roles, Wall Street, Fatal Attraction, Basic Instinct, and The American President. Today in History, September 25th. Tim McGuire, The Associated Press.
Not a bad day in the Windy City. Mild fall temperatures, and that trend will continue for the short term. I'll have a complete look at your weather picture coming up in just a moment. We had lots of sunshine and mild temperatures again today. Tonight, just a few clouds developing with a low near 6. Tomorrow, mainly sunny with a high near 15. Thursday, clouds and showers developing with a high of only 6. Friday, the sun returns with the mercury climbing to 11. Saturday, a low pressure system returns, bringing more cloud and a high of only 9. Sunday, overcast once again with a high of 5 degrees. Checking our almanac, the average high for this time of year is 18 degrees and an average low of 4. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 2001 at 33 degrees. The record low was -9 in 1972. Sunrise was at 7:22, sunset at 7:24. Let's have a look at how tomorrow's shaping up across the country. It should be mainly sunny in Vancouver with a high near 18. Sunshine at 20 degrees expected in Victoria on Wednesday. A good chance of rain and a high of only 11 on tap for Calgary tomorrow. Edmonton will also have showers and get up to 12 degrees. Regina will have rain and 14 on Wednesday. Saskatoon will have a chance of showers and 12. Winnipeg, too, will have rain and the temperature should drop to 10. Over in the central part of the country, Toronto will have rain and 19. Ottawa will have showers off and on and should reach 20. Montreal will have showers and 21. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have periods of rain and 20. Halifax, Nova Scotia will have some showers and 19. Charlottetown, PEI will have some rain as well and 19. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, there will be a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 15 degrees on Wednesday. The National Chief for the Assembly of First Nations says Ottawa would have an easier time getting the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion built if it was moved. Harry Bellegarde says shifting the marine shipping terminal to Tsawwassen to avoid Indigenous communities that oppose the project is the smart move.
It's a win-win-win. You know, I've met with chiefs that are looking at and are supportive of the outlet to be at Tsawwassen as opposed to Burnaby. So why not do that? It's like, again, processes that unite rather than divide. If people can be brought to the table to dialogue and talk, sustainable economic development strategies. Because in the big picture of the economy, like, we are too dependent on the USA. So you need to look at other world markets.
Conservative leader Andrew Scheer says the Liberals should appeal the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion before the Supreme Court of Canada and legislate the project into existence. Last month, the Federal Court of Appeal overturned federal approval for the pipeline, citing insufficient consultation with Indigenous communities. Scheer says Ottawa should support a private member's bill from Alberta Senator Doug Black that reaffirms federal jurisdiction over the pipeline's construction. Oil prices surged after a recent meeting with OPEC and its allies ended with no decision to increase output despite U.S. President Donald Trump's call for lower prices. OPEC said it saw a healthy balance between supply and demand. The price rise is caused by a recent drop in Iran's supply because of U.S. sanctions. Benchmark crude was up 47 cents earlier today to $72.50 a barrel. The union representing thousands of Canada Post workers says it will stay at the bargaining table, averting a potential strike early tomorrow morning. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers announced it will not issue a 72-hour notice of job action. Both sides have been bargaining for separate collective agreements for urban and rural workers over the past 9 months. Negotiators faced a Wednesday morning deadline for a possible strike or lockout after conciliated talks failed. Now here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Dan McTagg with GasBuddy.com says the reason there's such a price difference at the pumps in southwestern Alberta is simple. A gas war is going on. Gas prices in Taber as low as $1.15, while in Medicine Hat they're at $1.12. Here in Lethbridge, meanwhile, we're averaging $1.30 a litre. When you see news happening, drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's top stories, check out our full newscast online at bridgecitynews.ca. Another big meeting is being planned between the U.S. and North Korea to discuss denuclearization. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari has details next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The 29th Annual Giant Pumpkin Festival and Auction in support of the Children's Wish Foundation is taking place Saturday, September 29th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Greenhaven Garden Center. Come out and enjoy face painting, wagon rides, a petting zoo, plus a live and silent auction, and much more. Currently, they're seeking sponsorships, auction donations, and volunteers to help make this day a success. For more information, contact Jamie at 403-795-4339. Come out for some fun and culture to Lethbridge's Arts Days taking place from now until September 30th. This event is coordinated by the Allied Arts Council of Lethbridge and takes place throughout the city. Activities include events such as an art walk, buskers, an artisan market, art activities, live music, and family affair on the square. For details, check out artslethbridge.org. Come out and show community support for the Canadian Cancer Society's CIBC Run for the Cure, Canada's largest single-day volunteer-led event in support of breast cancer research. They're looking for Run Day volunteers for Sunday, September 30th to help with setup and takedown, registration, security, photography, and more. For complete descriptions, shift times, or to sign up, visit vhub.at/Lethbridge or email lethbridgerunvol@ccscloud.org. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
The U.S. is ready to resume talks with North Korea after Pyongyang pledged to dismantle key missile facilities. Now, joining me now to discuss this very important meeting is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said he invited North Korea's foreign minister to New York, hoping to have a deal in place to denuclearize by January of 2021.
Yes, I mean, it seems a far time away, but at least it's some sort of definitive timeline, which is exactly what a lot of skeptics were saying after the historic meeting between President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Now, this meeting coming up this week at the UN General Assembly, what they're hoping for is a sideline meeting, something not with Kim Jong-un, but with one of his cabinet members, and hopefully to kind of work off of the momentum that was created in the summit between North and South Korea, in which North Korea allegedly promised to dismantle its main missile factory and also hinted towards taking down or at least deactivating one of its main nuclear complexes in exchange for certain provisions. Those are undisclosed at this time. But I think what Mike Pompeo was hoping for and what he was originally hoping for when he planned a trip over to North Korea, which was canceled by Donald Trump, is to move things forward, to have a definitive timeline, to get some specifics, to get some dates, and to hopefully work on the promise that was originally made between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un.
Now, President Trump will be visiting the United Nations once again, bringing his America First policy. Lisa, what kind of a reception will Trump receive from world leaders who have not been pleased with him pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, the UN Human Rights Council, and the way he lashed out at some of your closest allies?
Right. So he hasn't been the world's most popular leader. That's an understatement, I should say. But Donald Trump has been very much vocal about putting the pressure and going very hard line on Iran and Iran's leaders. Look, the United Nations General Assembly is a very funny thing. It's on U.S. property. It's in New York City. Beautiful piece of property, I may add. And you have leaders from all over the world coming, regardless of their relationship with the United States at that time. So you have enemies on foreign soil, basically. So, this is a wonderful opportunity for all sorts of countries to kind of talk it out, if only for, symbolic purposes, but hopefully for more, to build upon whatever was said throughout the year. So in this case, we have President Trump focusing his energies on curbing the Iranian regime's activities. We obviously know that the Europeans aren't so happy about Donald Trump pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal in May. They are finding every kind of way possible to keep this deal alive, but they're finding it very challenging to keep this deal alive, because in order to work around this deal, they would have to keep doing business with Iran, which is getting these sanctions from the United States. And in order to do business with Iran, they would risk losing business with the United States, which is probably too big of an account or a client to lose for many of these companies. So day after day, we're hearing reports of major companies pulling out of Iran for fear of risking, more business with the West. But I think it should be a very interesting year. I would also like to add, last year, Donald Trump was very hard and put a lot of pressure on North Korea, and look what happened. We had a historic meeting. So you never know what's going to happen. Perhaps this will lead to better talks and a better and more understanding with the Iranian regime. And we have to remember that sanctions are always better than war, and a way to perhaps curb the Iranian regime's activities at home and in the region.
Lisa, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on the Myanmar government to pardon and release 2 imprisoned Reuters journalists ASAP. The reporters have been investigating the killing of 10 Rohingya Muslim men when many believe they were set up.
Yes, it seems like these journalists were just doing their job, a story that many of us have been following. I know how you have been, and we've been talked about it here on this program quite a bit. The case, which we thought would be perhaps just a symbolic case against 2 investigative journalists, the message being don't, snoop around, which is an awful message, because we have so little of that authentic, on-the-ground journalism, that deep digging. And you have 2 individuals here who met with authorities. And again, as you mentioned, it seems as though, and many believe, that they were set up, that they were led to follow a certain trail that would get them in trouble and arrested. And that's exactly what we have here. They work for Reuters, an American company. And of course, because we have the UN General Assembly this week, it's a time where we have to call out for human rights abuses, for those who are imprisoned unfairly, for Americans and Canadians and Europeans and people of the free world who find themselves in this kind of trouble. I think it's very important that the head of the UN made this announcement ahead of the start of the General Assembly this week, because it really sets the pace. It sets the kind of environment that there is a global community and there is a community of journalists. And it seems from what we are told and what we know of these 2 journalists, they were there and working in good faith and working with integrity as 2 reporters, and we hope for their release very soon.
Lisa, Iran carried out some military drills in the Gulf Coast last week. Now, Tehran has suggested that it could take military action in the Gulf to block other countries' oil exports in retaliation for U.S. sanctions intended to halt its sales of crude. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, this is going to get very ugly before we see any kind of clarity on the situation. November 4th is when additional sanctions will be placed on the Iranian regime, focusing mostly on their energy and oil sectors. Oil, the only way that the Iranian regime has been able to stay afloat because of their exports. Obviously, those exports are down 25% in the last 3 months alone because of sanctions, because of that uncertainty, because of the pressure that's been put on the Iranian regime with the pullout of the U.S. from the nuclear deal. And now you have Iran trying again to stay relevant as much as possible, although that will be very difficult. You have countries like the U.S., like Brazil, Russia, Saudi Arabia, etc., pumping extra oil to make up for that slack. And because of that, you find Iran less relevant in the oil world. And because of the banking sanctions, it will be very difficult to do business with Iran. How will you pay them? International banking is cutting Iran off from the rest of the world. They will no longer be part of SWIFT. And because of that, we're seeing Iran finding itself in a situation in which they will do anything to keep pumping that oil and keep shipping that oil, but find it very difficult to do so.
Hong Kong's first bullet train, which travels 200 kilometers an hour, launched a new era of integration with mainland China. Lisa, the $11 billion train project was stoked with some considerable controversy, though. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is an awesome train. I wish they had one between the United States and Canada, because we have potentially better relations. But this is a beautiful train, obviously meant to travel between mainland China and Hong Kong. And the dilemma here, it's like getting a phone in your room and not wanting that phone line shared with your parents. They don't want to be connected back to mainland China when they've been autonomous for so long, legally, politically, kind of on their own. This will give, obviously, China more access, more information, kind of a fixture or connection to Hong Kong. So that was the kind of controversy or dilemma in the situation, but it happened and it's beautiful, and you have tourists taking photos and wanting to be the first to be on that train and taking selfies. So it's an exciting moment for them.
Yeah, 200K, that's probably what, Mach 2, Mach 3? You can feel the neck snap back just a little bit there. European Union leaders will push for a Brexit deal next month, but warn Theresa May that if she will not give ground on trade and the Irish border by November, they're ready to cope with Britain crashing out.
Yeah, this is more of the same back in the UK. You have proponents of the deal speaking out about, at least getting themselves heard on a couple of different notions. And if they don't get those few points, then they want the entire deal foiled, and they're thinking of backup plans as a result. And if there is no backup plan, they'd rather see the whole thing kind of foiled. It's interesting because after Brexit happened, it was kind of, I would say, the beginning, the first domino in this changing world order. And the reason I say that is because the Brexit vote really went under a microscope, the study of it. Why would they want to break apart from the European Union? Why would they want to go at it alone, particularly with regards to trade? And that answer came with a follow-up with the President Trump's winning of the election here in the United States. And again, the question became, why this change in world order? And now we're going back to the Brexit vote, and with the fine-tuning of the left versus the right. We're seeing this fight in Europe, left versus the right. You're seeing it in Canada, left versus the right. And it seems like in most cases it's a 50-50 split, which is why it's it almost feels like a civil war within each nation. I know that's the way we feel here in the United States. And in Brexit, I think that there's pros and cons, and both sides have been quite vocal in making the other side understand that they will not give in to their side and what they want. So important few weeks, but I think most people think that the Brexit will happen and it will be implemented.
Malaysian prosecutors have charged their former prime minister with 21 counts of money laundering and 4 counts of abuse of power over hundreds of millions of dollars received in his personal bank account. Lisa, this is corruption at its highest level.
Oh, yes. Nothing new, though. I think people in power, you see them having a certain salary in every country, and then they're worth X amount, millions, sometimes billions of dollars, and you kind of do the math. And in this case, this was a leader who didn't expect to be unseated and ended up being so. So he didn't get a chance to clean up his tracks, and as a result, this investigation ensued. A lot of corruption. He had his own fund that sounds very familiar to us here in the United States with the Clintons and the investigation that followed with their funds. I guess the point here is if you have public office, you really shouldn't have a fund until you're retired or find yourself out of office. So in this case, as I said, he kind of, I think, was unseated and very, very suddenly and abruptly so he didn't have a chance to kind of clean up.
Yeah, you're right. A pension fund is one thing, but that's something entirely different. Japan is having a tough time recruiting for its military. It seems the young people in the island nation would rather sign up for just about anything else, and their military is kind of drying up now.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. There's a couple reasons for this. First and foremost is the low birth rate in Japan. So just the age bracket that's required for military sign-up is diminishing and exponentially so. And secondly, it's just not so popular. Violence or patriotism, perhaps. I think they'd rather just be millennials and play video games or, just hang out rather than serve their country. I mean, this kind of speaks to why many countries have the kind of draft or, forced, military time because this is what happens. I think there's this unpopular view towards the military, and you have a situation like this. So we'll see what Japan's going to do, whether they start recruiting, they start making it a forced service, or start encouraging people to have more babies.
Could be too, yeah. Our Foreign Affairs Minister, Chrystia Freeland, here in Canada, has more frequent flyer miles than the Rolling Stones on a worldwide tour, farewell tour, Lisa, flying between Ottawa and Washington, Washington and Ottawa. Lisa, what's holding up getting a NAFTA deal done between our two countries? Is the U.S. administration maybe not too impressed with Chrystia Freeland?
No, I don't know if that's the case. Actually, the two representatives on the Canadian side and the American side actually have a very nice rapport. They've, after all, been working together on this for a very long time. And I read this funny report about how they could actually switch sides switch seats and switch sides on the argument because they know each other's talking points so well. I think what's going on here is that both countries see this as a muscle flexing moment. So while the rapport between the two might be wonderful, both of them look at this as a moment in which they need to shine and not give in and be stubborn. It's almost like a married couple fighting. So I think both of them want to be right. Both of them want to win. They want to get their talking points through. They want to walk away thinking they got the better deal. But I think both of them actually want this deal to go through as well. So I think when they find a way to make them both look great, and make both of them look like they won, they could walk away and have this deal go through.
Yes, and fingers crossed we get a deal done very soon. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.
The Old Farmer's Almanac has been around for quite some time. It was first published in 1792, making it the oldest continually published periodical in North America. Now, many people believe strongly in the Farmer's Almanac's long-range weather predictions. That's what we're going to talk to Jack Burnett about today. He's the managing editor and Canadian spokesperson with the Farmer's Almanac. Welcome back to BCN, Jack.
Hey, it's great to be with Bridge City again.
That's it, Bridge City News. Now, for our younger viewers, can you give me a bit of a snapshot of what exactly the Farmer's Almanac is?
Sure. The Old Farmer's Almanac is the book with the yellow cover, as you can see behind me. Has been around for 227 years. Technically, it's a calendar of the heavens, but it has everything in it from history, humor, food, folklore, gardening, astronomy, weather, many things, and a lot of them have been traditional over the years. We always strive to be, as we say, useful with a pleasant degree of humor, which is one of the catchphrases that was developed in the 1830s.
Jack, for our younger viewers, can you give me a bit of a snapshot of what exactly the Old Farmer's Almanac is all about?
Sure. The Old Farmer's Almanac is 227 years old. Technically, it's a calendar of the heavens, but it has everything under the sun and moon, including food, recipes, gardening, history, folklore, humor, everything you can think of. So there's something for everyone, including younger readers.
Now, was it always just about the forecast, or did you also always have something about food and exercise and so forth? Was it always like that, or was it just all about the weather in the beginning?
Well, we always had things about gardening and farming, and always had the weather, always had the tides, always had lots of other things. But in the old days, it was a lot more practical: stagecoach routes, when post offices were open, things like that. So these days, a lot of the stuff that we have like that are on the thousands of pages at almanac.ca. So we don't have to to put it all in the book.
Now, according to the 2019 Old Farmer's Almanac Canadian edition, this winter will bring below average temperatures for most of Canada and more snow everywhere. Jack, the people of Edmonton and Red Deer would agree with that. They've had quite a bit of snow already.
Yes, they have, and there's going to be more on the way. This is one of those years that seldom ever occurs with the Old Farmer's Almanac Canadian edition, which is that we have the same forecast for either temperature or precipitation across the whole country. So we see everywhere in Canada as being snowier this year.
So how accurate were last year's forecasts?
Well, last year, we go up and down. We're usually about 80%. Last year, our temperature forecasts were about 71% for Canada. The weather's been wacky, so we spend a lot of time and a fair amount of money trying to figure that out. However, the precipitation and snowfall forecasts were about 86%. So it averages out to like 79 or something, but it goes up, it goes down, but it's usually around 80.
Now, Jack, some of the folks with Environment Canada disagree with your forecast for the prairies. They're predicting a warmer winter, for us not so much colder, because there's a good chance of the El Nino effect. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, sometimes we agree with Environment Canada, whom we have a great deal of respect for. Sometimes we don't. We don't see the El Nino developing in the same way that they do. El Nino, which is part of ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, of course, means warmer waters in the Pacific. And by the way, you know, your listeners might want to know that the term El Nino derives from the early Americans in the 16th and 15th centuries who had met the Spanish explorers and knew about Christianity. So they noticed that El Nino, if it came, always came around what we call December, the same time that the Christ child arrived. So El Nino means the baby, so they associated it with Christmas.
Interesting. Now, according to folklore, when pigs gather leaves and straw, we can expect a cold winter. And when rabbits are fat in October, November, expect a long, cold winter. Do you know if people are in fact seeing that this year?
Well, it's hard to tell. We get so many reports from so many places across Canada. I personally have not heard those, but I've heard other ones. For example, that wasps' nests and hornets' nests are higher, you know, and what that means, you know, there's an old saying, wasp nest high, hard winter nigh. So when pigs, you know, when phenomena like that are seen, that's called phenology, which is kind of the science of signs. And so people say, well, are they true? Are they false? What's the deal with that? And in fact, for many of them, there can be a proof in either direction. But you say, why would they have lasted for decades and centuries if there hadn't been some truth to them to begin with? So we hear a lot of indications that the winter's going to be hard, you know, through phenology. And I'm sure that somewhere in our staff, we've heard the ones about pigs and so on.
Okay, Jack, let's get to the nitty gritty. We're here on the prairies. What does the spring of 2019 look like, and next summer as well, for Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba?
Sure. Well, we're looking for spring to be a little bit cooler, a little bit rainier, not by much though. Nothing to, you know, to worry about for farmers and ranchers. Summer, near normal temperatures. Again, a little bit wetter, but it's not going to be any type of a washout of a summer, anything like that. It'll be fine.
How about for southern British Columbia? A lot of us like to head out there for holidays.
Yeah, southern British Columbia, a little bit cooler, a little bit drier in the spring and summer. But again, you know, when you're talking in meteorological terms, you know, it's like a degree or something, which is not going to make a heck of a lot of difference.
What about the forecast for southern Ontario, places like Hamilton and Toronto?
Yeah, well, we're looking, you know, the winter, they're going to have normal temps rather than colder temps, as you know, as you will. And then in the summer, we're looking at a little bit cooler, a little bit wetter, but you know, not by much. They'll be fine. It's kind of a Goldilocks type of winter and summer across Canada. Well, the summer, I should say. The winter is going to be colder and snowier. Summer is going to be, you know, kind of just right. Sometimes a little hot, sometimes a little cool, sometimes a little dry, sometimes a little wet. Depends on where you are, but it'll mainly be just right.
Okay, let's head a little further east to Quebec and the Atlantic provinces. What are your thoughts on those areas?
Well, you know, as you know, it's going to be cold and snowy in Quebec, a little bit milder during the winter in the Maritimes. Quebec, we see next summer drier, normal temps, and then a little bit cooler and drier out in the Maritimes.
Now, I understand you do long-range weather predictions 18 months in advance. How exactly do you predict weather that far ahead?
Well, what we do is we use the same type of formula and methodology that was used in 1792. We take into consideration meteorology, which is the localized air masses and so on, climatology, long-term weather trends in an area, and also solar radiation, solar science, the sunspot cycle. And what we do is we've long since turned that into computer algorithms. And we've loaded all the weather observations we can find from Environment Canada and its predecessors into computers. We look for patterns in the past that resemble the present. Then, knowing what's good for us or what's important to us, we go back and look for patterns in the past that resemble the present. Then we say, would it make sense for what happened next back then to make, to happen next now? Computers spit it out. I'm just the messenger.
Now, the almanac also includes a trends forecast. You predict that Canada will see an increase in exercise classes at the grocery store. Now, what is that all about?
Well, what's that? That's part of the whole trend everywhere to multitask. And so when you go to the grocery store, you're kind of thinking, well, I need to lose weight, or gee, I should exercise more. And so the people who own grocery stores and grocery store chains, they're not dummies. They know that the happier you feel about yourself, the more you're going to buy. So if they make it easier for you to do a few exercises, you're going to be happier about buying things.
Now, in the latest Farmer's Almanac, DNA kits will help us to choose the best foods. Can you explain that?
Yeah, the Old Farmer's Almanac, Canadian edition. Another thing we see in our trends is how a DNA kit will enable you to see what types of foods your particular lineage should have more of or eat less of. In other words, if you're of a particular nationality, you may have a predisposition to being, to having too much cholesterol or whatever. And so the DNA testing will help you to target your food intake to what would be best for you.
Jack, one of the stories in this year's almanac I think would be a great interest to our viewers is the story of a father of hockey who believed in cross-checking every day. Can you share a bit more about that story?
Right, it was cross-checking, but it wasn't a hockey penalty. It was that he was checking his cross because he was a priest. This was Les Costello, who played for the Leafs, and eventually he had the calling. He became a priest and started a traveling hockey team called the Flying Fathers. They would go around and put on exhibition, and let people see how you could be playing and praying at the same time.
There wouldn't be any fights break out. Say, I'm laying hands on your brother. There wouldn't be anything like that, would there?
No. Well, I don't know. He was quite the player. As it turns out, he didn't pull any punches, so to speak. And so, I think that was part of the allure of seeing the Flying Fathers play.
Okay, I think enough puns for now. Let's talk about the woolly bear caterpillar. Apparently has the reputation of being able to forecast the coming winter weather. Is this fact or is it more folklore?
Well, it's both. There was a guy a scientist who did a study back in the late 40s of woolly bear caterpillars, and he determined that the wider the brown band, the milder the winter would be. The thing was, he didn't have that, he only used something like 100 woolly bears, which is not a scientific study by any stretch of the imagination. Other people think that the width of the brown band has something to do with the age of the caterpillar and how the previous winter was. Well, that is scientifically true, but would help you to predict the previous winter. But somehow in here, that original folklore, has been carried forward because it seems to work for people. So the wider the brown band, the milder the winter ahead.
Some say other animals can predict weather as well. For example, if a mole digs its hole 2.5 feet deep, expect severe winter weather. If it's 2 feet deep, maybe not so severe. 1 foot deep, a mild winter. Any thoughts to that?
Yeah, that's very true. There are a lot of things in nature that can be observed. Not just with animals, but corn. If corn husks are thicker, if you see squirrels gathering more nuts, there can be different interpretations of that. But the signs of nature, have been important across Canada, to the native peoples, for going back, millennia, and certainly it carries forward today.
Now, according to weather folklore, you can predict winter weather with a persimmon seed. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, the famous persimmon seed weather forecaster. So what you do is you take a persimmon, you take out the nut or the seed, you cut it in half. And what happens is you will see the kernel inside that nut, and it usually is in some sort of a linear form. So the deal is, if that happens to look like a fork, that means that it'll be a lighter type of snow for the winter. If it's a knife, it'll be a cutting winter with cutting winds and sleet and things like that. If it's a spoon, there would be a lot of shovel-worthy type of snow. So that's how persimmon works.
Wow. Now, some people also believe in the pig spleen method of predicting weather. How does that work?
Yeah. Well, the pig spleen method has also had a lot of use, particularly in Canada and in Saskatchewan, where it first evolved. What that is if you care to obtain a pig spleen somehow and go for this, what they do, this guy named Gus Wickstrom in Saskatchewan, Tompkins, Saskatchewan, actually, he would take a pig spleen and he would lay it out and he would mentally divide it into 6 sections. And the top section closest to the head would be the current month. So we'll go for 6 months, and any month where it was thicker or wider or anything like that, that would be calling for more inclement weather. So that's how that works. If you've got a pig spleen kicking around, you can give it a try.
And just as there is around supper time. Perfect timing. Jack Burnett, the Farmer's Almanac's managing editor and Canadian spokesperson, thanks a lot for joining me today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.